So today I wanted to talk about method books in piano teaching. So there are a lot of different methods out there, and there are many different ideologies about methods. I know some teachers believe in using different methods for different students. Others believe in sticking with one method. Others have a few of their favorites that they like to use. But there is a lot to choose from out there. So I wanted to kind of talk today about how to select a method book with a knowledgeable understanding about method books. So piano method books are not all created equal. And I don't know how many people have actually sat down in method books and gone through them to kind of see how they're laid out and how they teach. But there are quite a few different styles of teaching within method books. Some method books teach from the middle C method, where the thumbs share middle C, and then the other fingers are on the other keys outside of that. And I think method books like Thompson start that way. I don't remember off the top of my head all of the method books that start that way. Faber tends to start that way. And there are probably some others that start that way, but I don't remember them all off the top of my head. But there's the middle C method. And then the other method that I've seen often would be the C position method, where right hand is on middle C, left hand is on the low C, and they're in a 5-finger pattern with both hands having the lowest note as C. Piano Safari starts that way. And if I remember correctly, I think Piano Town does as well. So those are just some top differences in method books. And you have to keep in mind, depending on how the method book starts, is how the notes are taught as far as reading goes. And I'm going to make another video on teaching note reading, because I firmly believe that how I teach note reading is the way to teach note reading. And we'll get into that in another video soon, because teaching note reading is difficult and a lot of students struggle with it, but they really don't have to. But we'll get into that another time. So when you're picking a method book, you have to understand, where does that method book start? Is it middle C method? Is it a C position method? Another thing to keep in mind is, how slowly or how quickly does this method book progress? Alfred method books, I feel like, progress very quickly. They get very, very, very fast. They get into sharps and flats, I feel like, too soon. And I feel like Faber gets into legato and slurred passages too soon. So you have to kind of know how quickly or how slowly each method book flows. Another thing to keep in mind is the kind of music. Alfred is more popular in jazz style. Faber is more on the classical folk music style, with some jazz and rock and blues and boogie woogie things, inserted in there here and there. Things like Piano Town. I feel like Piano Town is more of an exercise type of sound more than it is a musical sound. So you have to keep in mind, how do the pieces sound? What style are they? And how fast they go, what they focus around, like if it's a middle C method or a C position method. So there are a lot of variables in method books. And people might say, well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is some things work and some things don't. And one method that might work for one student won't work for another student. So my advice, this is my advice to anyone who is brand new to teaching piano, or even if you've taught piano for a while and you've never gone through method books, go to a music store or even a library if you have a really good library, or if you can go to a university library is even better. Pull out all the different method books. Look at the beginner books, the first book in every single method, and just sit down and compare them. Get a notebook or a computer and just start typing up, Faber does XYZ, Alfred does ABC, and so on. And just learn about method books. They are all very different. Now, when I first started teaching piano, I have 2 degrees in piano pedagogy, actually. And when I completed my bachelor's degree, we were required to go through the method books that way, and it was incredibly enlightening. However, I was also left under the impression that method books should be matched to the student, that siblings should not share the same method book because it's going to cause rivalry, or, you know, Susie Q may have started piano 6 months later than her brother Johnny, and now she's way ahead of him. Those are all valid concerns. But in the last 5 or so years of teaching, I have drastically changed my perspective on that. And I'm going to share with you my perspective in this video. This is just my opinion. You can take it or leave it. But the number one thing I want to leave you with is go through and study method books. Know how they work. There are so many method books out there. You have Alfred. You have Bastien. You have the Faber Piano Adventures. You have Piano Town. You have Irina Gorin's Tales of a Musical Journey. Succeeding at Piano, I think is the name of it. There are so many methods out there. I mean, I feel like a new method comes out every few years. And some of them are good and some of them just aren't. So go through and study them, know what's out there. For the longest time, I used the Faber methods, or the Faber method books. I have since basically moved away from Faber. I will, however, use their Gold Star performance books, or I will definitely use their sight reading books, and I'll make another video on that later, on sight reading books and why I use them and how to use them. But I like to use Faber's supplemental materials, and honestly, I only use these books for students who need a slower paced learning. I have found that if I start students in these method books, and by these method books, I mean most of these method books use a 5-finger pattern in some way, shape, or form, whether it's middle C or C position. I have found them to be horrible in many ways. My students have very tight hands and their hand shapes are not correct. They're unable to play with fluidity and freedom. They struggle with learning to read music. There are many the biggest thing I see is when you keep them in method books for too long, because method books are very explanatory, I'm going to say, and very specific on you need to move here to here. I have found that students kind of become dependent on that stuff. And I feel like these books slow down their progress. So I only use these with students who are, you know, struggling with sight reading or struggling with rhythm, or they need those extra helps, because there are some students out there who do need that sort of thing where it says you need to move your hand from middle C to the high C. And some people need that, but they don't need to be in that forever. I do not ever keep students in these books all the way from beginning to level 6 ever. I have done it in the past, and it's really unnecessary, in my opinion. Now, just keep in mind, this video is highly my opinion based on my teaching and my experience. So you can take it or leave it. You can leave comments. You can be mad at me if you want to. Give me your point of view. That's totally fine. I'm just sharing with you what I do. So I do use these books on occasion still, but I do not use the lesson books. I don't use the technique books. I do not use the theory books. I actually hate the theory books. I'll make another video on theory books and things later. I honestly stick with like the Gold Star performance, because these pieces are a little bit more interesting. Like here's one piece. They're on the easier side, but they're more interesting. They're not like your basic, you know, exercise type sounding piece. So what do? I used to be on the bandwagon of match the method to the student, and also not have siblings in the same books. But I've gone away from that, and here's why. Most American methods use the 5-finger patterns right away, and I find that severely limits students' abilities to play, including adults, because they are basically stretching the hand all the time, and it's causing unnecessary tension all the way through here. So I'll make another video on that, on, you know, technique and everything and how to do that. But I've actually moved to Irina Gorin's Tales of a Musical Journey for every beginner. including adults. Now, these books are really kind of silly. There's a story, and it's very childish. So my older students and adults, I tell them, if you like fairy tale stories, you can read the story if you want to, but you can also skip it and overlook it, because what we're using these books for is the methodology behind it. Now, Irina Gorin she came from Ukraine, and when she came to America, she found the same problems that I am finding with the 5-finger patterns and the tension and problems. So she has made these books where they start with one key and one finger. I'm going to find it here. And they basically start out I'm going to just go to the beginning of this. I want you to see how this works. And you can look her books up online. She's got a website, and if you want to take her pedagogy courses, you can pay to take her pedagogy courses. My opinion, they are worth it. I don't agree with everything she teaches, and I don't do everything that she teaches, but she does have really good concepts and ideas you can walk away with and then utilize them in ways that work for you and your students. But she uses a lot of imagery, and that's honestly how I teach. So for example, she has them think about having an apple in their hand. I prefer to use a bubble because then they don't want to cat claw and squeeze and pop their bubble. But that's how she starts. She starts very heavily on good technique right away. And then there are 2 reasons I like her books. One, I love how she introduces the notes and she makes note reading easy. And 2, I like how she only uses one finger starting out. They start with finger 3 because it's easier to learn to balance the arm on that finger. It's a strong finger. It's also the tallest finger. So they learn how to balance on finger 3. And then they move to 2 and 4. They do not get to pinky and thumb until much later because the technique with those is a little bit more complicated and different. So that's why I use her books. I do not go through and do absolutely every page in her books. I've kind of adapted it to my teaching style. And this is her older edition. But she starts out teaching them directional reading, which I feel like a lot of people overlook. And that's one of the reasons students struggle to read music, is they don't understand directional reading. So I like how she uses a lot of directional reading. She doesn't really use the floating notes or the pre-reading, which is fine. Those can be really difficult for students to read from. And I'll make another video on this, on how to make the pre-reading floating notes more readable and user-friendly for students. The other thing that she does, she simplifies rhythm to circles. So these represent half notes. These represent quarter notes. I don't think it's as necessary to do the circle. So this is something I kind of skip, as far as, like, she has activities and exercises and things they can do based on this. I like to use other methods to teach rhythm, but we still play these rhythms on the piano, and we'll follow these and make these half notes and quarter notes. And if your student struggles to see the circle, you can just add a stem to the note, and then it all of a sudden looks like the actual quarter note and half note. So I can work with that. And then she gets into mixing the pre-reading with the rhythms. And again, they're sticking to just using 3rd finger for a lot of this. So I have actually gone through and studied all the method books, and I really like these because these are at a good pace, and you can skip through these and make them go as fast as you need, or they are thick enough. There are so many pieces in here that I feel like you can use this book for students who need to go slower, and you don't really need to supplement too much. And then she has a book 2. And another reason I really like her books, like I said, these are kind of a crutch because they don't really push the student to learn how to play music more independently. They're just always explaining, which some people need that. And it's good to have this sort of thing. And like I said, I still use this for students who need that. But in her book 2, she already gets into things that they need to know and learn to play classical repertoire. For example, we start 2-note slurs, and look at how easy the reading is. So the thing that I like about her books, she is keeping the music aspect really simple while teaching these concepts that we usually don't really get to until intermediate level, where the reading is harder You have a thicker stack of notes to read generally between the hands. You have a lot of leaps, a lot of technical things going on, and then all of a sudden we throw things like this in. I just feel like how she introduces this is much better. So I really like her books a lot. Like I said, I don't go through and do absolutely everything. We skip through things, and some things that she teaches later in her books, I'll teach my students earlier. And you can tailor these to fit every individual student. And honestly, you can take any method book, including Faber or Alfred, and you can tailor it to fit that student. And you just have to know what's available for supplemental materials. You can find a lot of free things on the internet and print that off. But that's what I do with method books with beginners. I start everybody in Irina Gorin's book because I feel like it gives them the most success at learning technique and also learning note reading and rhythm, getting comfortable with rhythm. And then you can supplement as needed. And I can make another video too and kind of go through what books I use for my beginners and how I teach my beginners, and then as we progress into intermediate and so on, and how I do that. I think I've covered basically the most popular methods that are out there for American teachers. If you have other methods that you use and you like, leave them in the comments. I have, and I encourage you to do this too. I have taught from just about every single method that's out there. Not because I wanted to kind of test things out for myself, but because I've had students come to me that I felt like would do, I've had a student that I was like, well, I think they would really do a good job, really do well in Piano Safari. And I've only used that with one student, and she did well in it. I've had a couple of students that I felt like Piano Town would be a good method for them. And honestly, like I said, they all start in 5 fingers. So if I do use Piano Town, it's very rare. The music is very dry. But I have a lot of respect for Diane Heidi and Keith Snell who wrote those. They really are excellent pedagogues. So the method behind their method books is good. So as long as the student has a pretty decent ability with technique and they're not super tense. But like, for example, if they're struggling with note reading, sometimes I'll put them in those books because of how they teach note reading. So I do still occasionally use different method books. But all of my very, very, very first beginning students, I put in these. Transfer students, it just depends on what they need. Okay, I think that covers everything. Go out, learn about the method books, go look them up online, read on them, watch YouTube videos like these. I'm sure other people are out there that have like every single method book and will make a YouTube video on the pros and cons of all of them. My personal favorites are Piano Town, obviously, or not Piano Town, Tales of a Musical Journey. I like this one. My secondary favorite would be the Faber Piano Adventures. And then after that, I do like Piano Safari and Piano Town for certain students for certain reasons. And beyond that, my least favorite method books, I really dislike Alfred and Bastien. I try to stay away from Sham and Thompson as well, because those are just very outdated and I feel like there are better methods out there. I know Thompson is a middle C method book and it moves kind of fast. So, I mean, these books are still out there. You can still use them, but those are just some of my least favorites. I don't really use any other methods outside of that. And I'll throw this in there too. I only keep my students in method books for about the first 2 years. After that, I transition them into actual classical repertoire, and we start working on chords and things like that, and I can make some videos on how I teach these things as well. But one more thing. When they get into this book, Irina Gorin has it's a solo, duet, and etude book. It's 3 books combined in one. It's a little expensive. It's like $18, but it's well worth it, because it allows your student to work on solo pieces that kind of match what's going on in here. It also allows them to work on very simple duets so that they can get comfortable playing with other people. And the other thing that I really love about it is she has etudes in the back. And I don't think people realize young students can start etudes in their first and second year of doing piano. And there are etudes out there that are simple enough and well written that students can learn certain technical things very easily. So I like to start my students in etudes, and I keep them in etudes for quite a while. All right, if you have any questions, want to see other videos on things, or want to know my thought on other methods, just let me know in the comments below. Leave your thoughts about methods, what works for you and what you do, and I love to read and learn, so I'll read your comments. All right, I'll see you in the next one.